The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the Association for Software Testing, its management, sponsors, or staff.
We've got Richard Bradshaw with us, and he's known on Twitter as Friendly Tester. Right?
And we like friendly people, really.
And we like friendly people. So
that's good then.
I'm not going to lie, that was a criteria. And we've got you here today to talk about automation, which happens to be one of your favorite topics.
It is one of my favorite topics, yeah.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed in your bio for CAST here, you listed that you are a fan of automation that supports testing. So I guess I wanted to start with that. What does that mean to you when you say that?
Initially, when I wrote it, it meant I was seeing a pattern where there seemed to be automated testing over here and then testing over there. Mm-hmm. And there's like a divide between them. So I want automation that supports this main event, which is always testing. That's always our main focus. So this automation really needs to provide information that helps us do our job as testing. But the second bit is building tools that help us test. Not tools that do automated testing or check-in, tools that help me as I test. And they're my favorite things to build.
I think that's really common, is we have the automation, it's even separated by people. We have the automation people here, we have everyone else over here. There's not a ton of carryover between the two, and that's not something you'd advocate for.
No, I wouldn't advocate for it. I think it happens. I think these people need to start talking to each other a lot more and start making sure that they're building things that do support. And if there is a separate divide, these testers need to be making sure that what's being automated is of value and actually making sure these people are talking.
So what's the first step to combining that?
I think it would be, I don't think enough people do this, but reviewing all the automated checks that are in place.
Okay.
Regularly reviewing them with product owners and testers and developers to see which ones could be shed. Because deleting automated checks is not a bad thing, it's a really good thing. And people
this is 14 years old, we can keep that.
But it's green, leave it.
Right. It passes every day.
Exactly.
Good.
So I think getting them talking is the first sign, is the first path, and then working out what can go and what needs to be added, and also making sure that the frameworks that are built really help the testers. But I also think that is shifting. I don't think they're going to have this divide for very long. There's a lot of testers learning to code.
Well, and I think, a lot of people are moving. I used to give a hard time to people about this. I worked in an environment where it was installed software, and everybody wanted to talk about web. And honestly, a lot of stuff is transitioning to web. And that sort of promotes the automation thing, because as Dee and I can both attest, a lot of what we do, you can't actually touch without a tool.
Yeah.
Or at least not well.
Right.
It's very cumbersome. And so it kind of forces your hand, and you say, okay, well, if I'm going to use a tool, then I might as well do this well, and I want to learn this. I want to see how this works. But how do you take someone who maybe is facing that, is looking at it and goes, what do I do?
Well, I think as you said about using a tool, like people often overlook the browser. Everyone who's doing web tab for testing, they're using the tool. It's a browser.
That's 12, baby.
Yeah.
That's 12.
To help them test.
What does it mean when you get all that stuff in the console?
Yes.
I think it's really intimidating when people are getting started. If you come from a manual testing background, now it's like, well, you should be using browser tools, and there's countless other things you could start to look at for automation. But it's a lot. It's a lot of information, and how do you get over the fear of I don't understand what all of this stuff is? Like, I see an error in the console now. Who do I go to for that? What do I do? I think that's really hard for a lot of people who are new to this world.
I think there is so many tools out there. There's a different fruit every week. There's a different vegetable coming out.
Right.
Even the standard tools that exist, I would just encourage people, firstly, to pair. Katrina mentioned pairing today. Mm-hmm. I think encouraging people to pair with each other and work with each other. But in terms of getting into automation, I think the testers who are now doing lots of exploratory, I don't like the word manual, but I'm going to say it because I've already started saying it, manual testing.
Yeah.
They just need to actually take a step back and try and work out where a tool could help them. Mm-hmm. Too many teams try to replace what they're doing, and they say, all these 20 tests that I have to run all the time, I want to automate them all. because it's
Right.
it's slowing me down. Whereas they could look at it and go, well, when I run this, it takes me 5 minutes to create all the data, and then it only actually takes me 2 minutes to run the test. So why don't you automate the creating of the data,
Yeah.
and then leave the tester to do the rest, and then build up to this switch where you'll just switch it over to being an automated check all the time. We always seem to want to just go straight to that.
Right.
And I don't think that's useful. I think we can start building up. And as Nicholas was mentioning, keeping the human bit going. Because if we're using the tools to help us, then we learn more. Because we learn. The automated checks don't learn. They don't know anything. they just detect.
I think some of the most successful things I've seen with automation is just getting all the data set up, getting accounts in the right place, getting jobs in a place that I can go and then run my tests. Because sometimes in some of the projects I've worked on, there's just been, it's been so data heavy. You need a very specific configuration just to get started. And if I were to set that all up manually, it could take me hours or days or whatever,
Yeah.
but you call up the automator and be like, hey, how about this and that? And, oh yeah, no problem, I'll get that for you. And it's like overnight, it's like brilliant, yeah.
It is great. It's the state manipulation. We don't talk about it a lot, but like getting your system into a certain state is really valuable. And like, again, Katrina and Carol were talking about DevOps a little bit. That's where they can really help us now. If you can deploy your stack locally and put it in any state that you want, or you could deploy one into the cloud and on demand in any state that you wanted, that just saves you so much time of fiddling around or seeing testers like sat in SQL trying to set up data. It's madness, and
Right.
it's asking for errors as well. So
Yeah, that's true, especially if you're doing it multiple times in a row.
exactly, and the multiple time thing is a really good heuristic to pinpoint where automation could help.
Because sometimes a week's worth of work is worth it if you're going to be using it for the next year or
Yes.
2 years. Yeah, absolutely.
And also on that note, though, don't be afraid to write stuff that could just be thrown away. If it helps you for the next few days, you don't have to write it all perfect. Just write it good enough, and then just discard it after a few days.
Okay, all right, I'm following you.
Yeah.
So are there kind of on-ramps to automation that you might suggest if you're in the web space? For example, I've seen some people say, well, a good place to start might be to start with the browser. Start looking what's occurring for your website or your tool, or even take a look at the API. What's your take on that?
In someone like getting new into automation, if they're in the web space, I think definitely starting with developer tools, trying to understand what they do. They can give you so much information. Trying to work out the information out of that can help you test. Because a lot of people don't go beyond the UI. As you said, press one button, F12, and you see loads of information under there.
And that's what's interesting about the web space.
Oh, it's amazing.
You basically see everything that's happening.
Exactly.
The gritty details are right there. You just have to hit F12. And then understand what you're looking at. That helps.
Of course. But again, pairing with people, there's lots of resources out there. There's lots of training materials, lots of blogs where people are explaining how they use developer tools. And then in terms of, this is more of a pattern I see that I think needs to be slightly discouraged, especially in the web. A lot of people go straight to WebDriver and then try and learn the programming language as they're doing WebDriver. I think we should learn the basics of the programming language first, and then get going with various tools that do automated checking for us, like WebDriver or API tools.
But isn't the difficulty there that I've found is it's hard to learn in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's almost easier to say, I have this problem, I want this tool, WebDriver, whatever happens to be, to solve this problem for me, and I need to do it today.
Yeah.
So where's the balance?
Me and Mark did that in our tutorial yesterday. We were saying you really need to pinpoint that problem and then find the right tool set. A lot of people have it the other way around. They have a big framework that is a specific tool, and then they try and make it fit for the new problem that they've just come across. Whereas I think if we spent more time on the actual problem and then research lots of tools, again, take advantage of the community. As Dawn just mentioned, there's lots of forums out there, lots of groups where you can ask people, have you ever done this? And just get more insight into tools. But to back that up, that's where if you have that basic programming knowledge, you can shift to any tool quite easily, even languages.
I used to not believe that. And now that I've been exposed to several other languages over the years, I believe it more.
Yep.
And I've also discovered that you don't have to necessarily be very technically skilled to be able to understand what the program is saying to you.
Well, there's been a bit of debate about that over the years, the whole should code, not code. But there's a really good Alan Parkinson made a distinction between reading the code and knowing how to write the code.
Right.
Right.
And if you can read code, that's probably an easier skill.
It is.
Because the programming bit isn't actually difficult, that's typing keys. The working out the models in your head of what you want to actually create, that's the skill.
It's setting up all the plumbing
Yeah, exactly.
and making sure the water doesn't fall out.
That's an ongoing task as well.
Constantly, get a bucket. Get a bucket. We're losing bits. It's terrible.
Or it just goes on fire all the time. It's just big red board and it's like constantly trying to put them out. It happens.
So for someone who's more of an intermediate, they've gotten into the basics, they've figured out the F12 thing, they're maybe even playing with some off-the-shelf tools. They're not fully into programming yet. What do you think the next step is for someone like that?
I think at the moment, we're obsessed with speed. We're all trying to get our releases out the door faster and faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We needed it yesterday.
Yeah, so I think getting to know your stack a bit more. There's a lot of tools now that are lower down. So me and Mark yesterday were teaching people how to move WebDriver checks down to maybe the JavaScript layer or the API layer, or even moving up to the visual layer now, because those tools have become a lot better. So I think, again, it's just analyzing your problem, trying to work out where you think, it's back to the point at the beginning, about the automation really supporting you. If you're spending all your time maintaining lots of stuff, then you should probably reframe that and put that somewhere else to help drive you forward.
Yeah, it might be better to have a litany of tools that can get you set up versus automating everything.
So I think to answer the question directly, though, I think if they stopped just for a bit of time to reflect on what they had so far, and then try and identify the problems again that are there. Because a lot of the time you think you've solved the problem because your build's green. But the problem's still there, or it's just slightly changed.
When I see green, I go, really? Are you
Right?
sure?
Does it just give you that like warm fuzzy feeling
I
that
get no
everything
warm
came
fuzzy
back
from
green?
greens,
I know.
Yeah, I don't trust green.
I don't either. I'm like, there's something wrong.
Unless you've regularly reviewed it and then you know what it does.
That's true.
Right.
Then you have a bit more faith in the green. But we are blinded by green. Definitely.
Right. I wonder, I think too, one of the problems I think a lot of people try to solve with automation is regression testing. And I almost hate to ask because this feels like a giant can of worms. But like, how do you decide, or are there, I don't know, I don't want to use the word best practices because that's a terrible thing around here and the tweet printer will go crazy. But are there things you think about that help guide you into like what might be good for a regression test? Like, how do you know what to like put in the bank and say, you know what, I want to keep reusing this on and on?
So I created a model which has a very funny name. I created the fart model, which is the flawed approach to regression testing.
Oh, you have a whiteboard testing
Yeah, it's
video
on the
that.
whiteboard. It's on the Whiteboard Testing YouTube channel.
Okay.
So you can watch it. But the approach a lot of people take is we generate like this much knowledge, and then we automate this much knowledge, and then we think everything's okay. And at that point, the system was this big. But the fact that you have a job means your system's continuously growing. So therefore, your knowledge needs to grow, which means you need to test, because you can't acquire it any other way, apart from obviously chatting to people and stuff. So your knowledge needs to grow, and then your automation needs to grow with it. But the bit that you thought was covered, the system doesn't look the same anymore. So even though it's green, you need to go and review it all the time and keep it up to date.
It's too easy to shelve that stuff. And say,
It really
you know
is.
what?
Right.
It worked before, it's going to keep working, let's do something else.
And I really love, so Karen asked the question before, Karen Johnson's RC. One of the best ones on there for me is the reputation and revenue. Focusing automated checks on the areas so reputation would be obviously brandings and things like that. And then obviously revenue. What's the main business of your application? Because sometimes we automate a lot of the stuff that's just fluff.
Right.
Pretty things that the user likes. But the actual core of the business, such as maybe a payment or like someone signing up for free accounts or whatever, if that needs to work, because that's how your business grows.
Right.
And that's what we're here for, to support our stakeholders. So
fun question. We've centered a lot around web technologies, right? And this is actually a question that could have come from me.
Sure.
But it came from Twitter, which is...
And we know it wasn't you because you're sitting here.
Yeah, because I'm reading it. Which open source tool is used for non-web technologies automation, if you know?
So non-web, do they mean non-browser? I wonder if they mean
I'm assuming installed
API.
software.
Installed software.
Yeah.
I know it's not open source, but Microsoft are doing great things at the moment. So in terms of like desktop applications, I know that they're releasing a lot of their stuff. So things like Coded UI. There was a version called White, which was used on desktop. So that's open source. In terms of other things, no, I'm playing around and I've become a big Internet of Things geek. So I started building little robots.
True.
But again, they're still using HTTP web request.
And it depends a lot on the OS. Some things that I got into some time ago were COM objects. If someone can expose a COM interface for you, you can take just about any scripting language and connect to it and make the software do stuff.
Yep.
I mean, we were doing it earlier today with the software we're using for this live stream. I was driving the application from the background.
Nice.
5 lines of code. It was great. I find it quite mystical when it works. So that's another option, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I don't really know about the tools because I've not been in that space. But again, back to the languages, there's lots of cool, funky languages out there that you can get to grips with. And if you do know the basics of our language, they always joke that developers love Stack Overflow. So if you know what to Google, you can find the answers.
And I think that's something that people don't tell you, and developers know this, but maybe testers won't, is that quite literally, when you have a coding problem in front of you, you really need to Google for it, because a lot of times you can just lift somebody else's stuff and just take it outright and then beat it into submission, right? It's like, okay, this does 800 things. I need 2 of the things out of here. I'm going to beat this until I get my 2.
You're taking all the magic out of software right now.
It's true. Copy and paste it, it can help, but I've been bitten by that as well. So also try and understand it if you can. There was one that was to do multi-threading in Java, and I did just copy and paste that. I wasn't even interested in trying to work out how it worked. But it did work. So it was useful. Yeah.
It's a mystery to me why it works.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of mentioned it a little bit before, but I want to highlight it again because I think it's so cool. So you're maintaining this video site called Whiteboard Testing, and what I love about it is you've got all these like compact little bits of like beautiful content that you're handing out on specific topics. So I want to I'm going to ask a bunch of questions and then just let you go. So what inspired you to do it, and what kind of content are you doing? How often do you release videos? Are you looking for contributions?
So the reason I did it was I was studying regression testing, funnily enough, and all the videos on YouTube were all either conference talks, which are great, but they're always roughly an hour long. Or there was a lot of marketing from vendors and other places, or training providers, which again was all really long and quite waffly. So I thought, what if there was short, precise videos, no longer than 10 minutes, even though I broke that rule in the very first video. It was 11 minutes.
Nice try.
But nice and precise, and then underneath it, there's lots of references of where I've got my stuff from. So you watch the video just to get enough, and if you want to go further, the stuff there is to go further. So that's why I started it, and I kind of also started it because I've bought a big whiteboard, obviously, and when I was doing my own work, I just started doodling on it, and I was like, I really enjoy working this way. And then I just came up with the idea of sharing them. In terms of releasing them, at the start, it was like 1 every 2 weeks. There hasn't been one for about a month at the moment, by me. However, I have had 3 people do them. I've had lots of people say they'll do them, but they won't. So it is open for everyone. I have to upload it, but if you have a whiteboard or a flip chart, a guy called Lim Sim stuck a piece of paper to the wall and filmed himself with his smartphone. But yeah, it is just short 5 to 10 minute videos, just with enough information to get someone on their way. And then send them to me and I'll upload them.
And you're basically looking for practical, actionable content. 10 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Or the next one's free. Oh wait, they're all free.
They're all free. And something visual, that's the idea, is when you visualize something, it becomes a lot clearer. We had some great visualizations in my class tutorial yesterday of people visualizing their automated architectures and how much UI and how much API and how much unit testing they have. And those models, everyone can see the model, and then you have something to walk them through, which is why I think the whiteboard's great. And also, you don't have to be an expert in PowerPoint or Photoshop or one of these things to try and draw something that looks good.
Right.
Yes.
So
understood.
But yeah, it's really great. It's grown. It's quite popular. It's got a lot of subscribers, and we recently broke 15,000 views, which is pretty cool.
That's a decent pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
So check that out. Is there anything search criteria for YouTube is?
The channel is called Whiteboard Testing, and the Twitter account is at Whiteboard Test.
Okay.
So
if people have content, talk to you.
Yeah.
And I think your Twitter handle is at the bottom of your name tag that you can't see.
Oh, it is.
The virtual one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my Twitter handle is at Friendly Tester.
Okay. Cool. Anything else?
No.
Any last tips? Anything we must know?
Don't be afraid of automation, and honestly, pair with people. Talk to your developers, get help. Don't try and do it all on your own, because we are in the big teams these days, and we can get help from everyone in the team, and they'll help you go forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us
No
today.
problem.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me.
And that's it for us.